You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Well, Leafs coming off back-to-back wins this past weekend as we welcome you into McGuire Mondays. A shutout win over the Montreal Canadiens on Saturday night, 1-0. And then, of course, a statement game, even though not necessarily the play lived up to the score, but they win 4-1 against the Carolina Hurricanes on the road. While all of us, me, was watching the Masters, but my co-host here, the extraordinary analyst, Pierre McGuire, was certainly watching the Toronto Maple Leafs. Thank you for joining us here today, Pierre. Let's talk about that Carolina Hurricanes game because it was the end of a very long week, which we will get into, of which they won 3 of those 4 games. And they take the win. They win 4-1 against Carolina back-to-back. They really could have mailed it in after their first period wasn't so great. But what clicked for them to be able to come away with a 4-1 win?
I think the late goal by Pontus Holmberg and the really smart play by Morgan Riley. And I think you could just see the team started to feed off of that. I thought they played a tremendous second period, Julia. Very seldom will you see Carolina get dominated in their own building the way they were in the second period because they're a shot total team. They really like to up the ante with shots on net. I think they only had 4 shots on goal in the second period, if I remember correctly. And the truth of the matter is that Toronto really squeezed the life out of that game, and they took advantage of their opportunities. So they were opportunistic. Austin Matthews obviously taking advantage of Morgan Riley and his creative playmaking. I thought by and large the whole team bought in. And they didn't have to play 5 defensemen like they had to on Saturday night. So that helped a lot too. Dakota Mermis went into the lineup. I think he played a little less than 14 minutes in the game. That helped a lot. But we've talked about Simon Benoit on the show a lot. He clearly is one of the most improved players in the league. Forget in Toronto, in the entire league. It's not just about his defense. Everybody knew he was a shot blocker. Everybody knew he's a guy that could clear the crease. I don't think anybody expected his stick skills to get to where they are right now. So you put it all together, Toronto's a really exciting brand to watch right now. 8-1-1 in their last 10. We've been pretty accurate on this show, by the way, you and I, in terms of what they would be doing winning-wise. They're winning a lot.
Well, I think that's all credit to you. You've been very positive about them all year, and that is because you're looking at the numbers, you're watching the games, you're seeing how they're doing. And you mentioned Simon Benoit. He was playing alongside Chris Tanev because we know that Jake McCabe was out. Oliver Ekman-Larsson was out as well, and it looks as though McCabe's kind of day-to-day right now. I've been told OEL will probably be there for game 1 of the playoffs, but let's go back to Joseph Woll. Mm-hmm. He kept them in there in that first period. You know, we look at both him and Stolarz. We assume very much that Stolarz is getting that game 1 at this point. But having both of them at where they are right now at this point in the season, how much of a benefit and almost like is this sort of like an X factor for a Toronto Maple Leafs team that really hasn't had that in so long?
It's substantial. I love the way you phrase it too, because I think you're spot on with that. They're 1A, 1B, or basically 1A minus. You know what I mean? They're both about the same. So I think the coaches trust both of them. I do agree with you, Julie. I do think Anthony Stolarz will get game 1 of the playoffs, whomever they play, whether it's Montreal, whether it's Columbus, whether it's Ottawa, whomever they play, they'll get, I think, Stolarz will get the number 1 nod in game 1. But here's the thing that I was impressed with. If you go back to Saturday night, I know Toronto dominated on the shot clock. They didn't dominate on the scoreboard. Stolarz had to make some big saves, especially late in that game and into the start of overtime. The saves against Suzuki with the left pad were phenomenal by Anthony Stolarz. That allowed them to buy some time and get Mitchell Marner that quality scoring opportunity that he finished against Jakub Dobeš to win 1-0. And that was a huge extra point for Toronto. But I think your point about both goalies being good is so valid because it does give them a position of strength. And when you look at it cap-wise, it's under $5 million for both of those guys. It's amazing. And I'm not talking about each. I'm talking about combined. It's unbelievable when you think about it.
Right. As you said, Stolarz was such a stealth pickup for them to be able to have. And for him, as you mentioned, Saturday night, making some of those big saves. Now, just to stay on that Saturday night game, they win 1-0 in overtime. As you mentioned, Mitch Marner with the game-winning goal. If someone wasn't to watch that game and they just saw it, 1-0 Leafs over the Habs, what is something they would have missed out on that the Leafs did well in that game.
They closed Montreal's rush game right off. Now, I know for Montreal's a back-to-back situation. They played a real emotional game where they kind of got steamrolled in Ottawa pretty good on Friday night. They've also played a ton of hockey. You got to give, like, whether you're a Montreal fan or not, you got to give every one of those players a huge pat on the back. They're playing as hard as they can. But what they did is they squeezed it like Toronto did. They played a playoff-style game. They squeezed the life out of Montreal's neutral zone game. By and large, for most of the game, there were some instances where it kind of got away from them, but they did it with 5 defensemen. That's not an easy thing to do. And there was a point in the third period where even the announcers, Chris Cuthbert and Craig Simpson, said, it looks like Morgan Riley's hurt. And they said it one or two times. And for Morgan Riley to continue to play the way he played, I thought he played a tremendous game. And then you see what Morgan Riley did on Sunday with 3 assists. I thought it spoke a lot about the character of not just Morgan Riley, but of the whole team.
Yes, certainly. And he has been doing really well recently. He wasn't paired with Carlo necessarily there, but he has lifted his game since Brandon Carlo has come on the team. And got to ask you then about some of the lines from Sunday, because we saw that Max Domi was up on the second line and Bobby McMann was on the third line. And for that second line, they had 2 goals. They scored 2 goals. They were very good 5-on-5, and they didn't allow anything. What did you like maybe about just the Max Domi, John Tavares, and William Nylander experiment?
Max is hunting pucks, and that's a big thing. You know, John's a skill guy. Willie's a really skilled guy. We talked about Willie last week. So Max is kind of a combo. Max's skating doesn't get nearly enough acclaim. He's really an explosive skater. So he can track down and hunt down pucks. He can force a lot of turnovers. He's clearly not shy. If you look at the fight that he had on Saturday night, that speaks to just his courage and his willingness to get involved with Caden Gooley. That's a guy that's a little bit bigger than him too. But Max is so good at forcing turnovers, and that feeds the fuel for Tavares and for Nylander. And he's not always going to be there. Max is sometimes going to go deeper in the lineup and he'll play with Robertson and McMahon, and then they'll put Pontus Holmberg up there, or maybe they'll put McMahon up there. I think there's a flexibility to this roster that's really good. If somebody's not going, Max can go. And if somebody's not going again, maybe McMahon can go. So there's a lot going on there. I love the versatility of the Leafs roster. The only line I really wouldn't touch, I wouldn't touch Knies, Matthews, and Marner. I wouldn't touch that line.
No. Oh, my Lord. A nice little give and go for Matthews in the game on Sunday. But holy smokes, Matthew Knies against Tampa was just like, oh, I just was so happy watching it, because for him even, I mean, he's just such an interesting player. He just is relentless in front of the net. I just love the way he plays. I think he just doesn't give up. And he seems fearless. What would you say about Knies? What do you really like about him?
Love his acceleration. Love how fearless he is. So I'm going to use your words, Julie, because I agree with them. And then the other thing that I like is he understands now. He's starting to understand, when do I have to get to the front of the net and be a screen to create room for Marner or Matthews? Or when do I have to hang back and to be in a scoring area where I can open up for the shot? He's starting to make those right reads. Earlier, he was more of a bull in a china shop. He's getting more refined now. He's understanding the subtleties of the game, and that just takes time. Those are just reps and just getting acclimatized to what Matthews likes to do, what Marner likes to do. And now he's starting to read the play a little bit better. And I think that's a big part of why he's been so successful of late.
Right. Knowing where to be at the right time, especially based on the tendencies of his teammates, and everything happens so fast when you're out there. I always wonder just like how the neurons and the synapses are firing in these guys' brains when they're out there. 'Cause it's so fast that it just, in a blink of an eye. I mean, sometimes it's like it's like, how did they know the vision to be in these certain positions, certain times? Also for deflections. I think deflections are so fascinating to watch, because it's like, in that moment, like, how can you see the puck? Like, just the, I guess it's the, what's the word? Whatever, like your ability basically to
hand-eye
depth perception.
Oh, depth perception and hand-eye coordination.
Like how? Sometimes I'm just like, how they're like a wizard. They're like Harry Potter or something. It's like, how do they know it's coming in at that level, at this,
Yeah.
you know how if you're going to play, so let's take a look at baseball. You know, when a guy strikes out and you're like, wow, that ball wasn't even anywhere near the bat, and he went for it, right? And you're like, but when a guy has an incredible deflection, it's like, how did he connect on that?
When you go, like, I was so privileged for so long to either be coaching in the league or broadcasting games in the league, and you go to practice and you watch these guys, or you run practices and you watch these guys, and I think about watching Johan Franzen in Detroit, Thomas Holmstrom in Detroit, Samuelson, Michael Samuelson in Detroit, watching Ryan Smith in Edmonton, Ulf Dahlin in Dallas and Minnesota. You go around the league, you watch Ulf Dahlin in New York too. You watch all these guys that are quote unquote net front presence guys, and you watch how hard they work at their craft. It's to your point, it's pretty amazing how skillful they are. And it really is an art. It's a skill. Deflecting pucks like that, especially out of the air, that's an art and a skill. I'll send you some that I have when we're done this show from all levels, and you'll be blown away. But because they're all very similar, the way the guys do it, it's pretty unique.
I know. I just find that is something that I still to this day, after watching hockey for many years, playing it for, more than half my life, it's just like I still can't get around how quick you have to react and to know. It's almost like they slow down time and space of that puck being shot to be able to connect on it. I think it's just a remarkable talent and skill. So I want to go back to the game on Sunday when we had talked about the second line, but the third line, we saw Bobby McMahon playing with Pontus Holmberg and Nick Robertson. And that line looked good as well. And then also the fourth line in the first period looked good. So we talk about flexibility, but what do you think works with putting Bobby McMahon on that line with those two guys?
Because of speed quotient. So Holmberg's not exactly real fast, but his brain thinks real fast. His hockey sense is exquisite. It really is. Robertson's skill level is really getting engaged right now, and you can see the confidence level that he has with the puck on his stick is huge. And especially when you look at the depth of the team on the right side, nobody's going ahead of Marner. Nylander's going to be just behind him. I think Robertson's got more offensive explosion than Yarncroke does. So you look at it, Robertson kind of fits right there. And if he can give you depth offense playing with McMahon, and let's just say Pontus Holmberg, just for the sake of argument right now, that's huge. That's gigantic. And then you're slotting Scott Lawton probably where they thought he would be, either in the 4-hole or the 3-hole. So let's say you slot him in the 4-hole. Then you got a lot of depth. And then David Kampf, who's not playing right now because of injury, he's a depth guy. And maybe he comes in and then you move Lawton up. The flexibility that Brad Treliving has given the coaching staff here is phenomenal. And that's one of the things you don't hear a lot of people talk about going into the playoffs. But injuries happen in the playoffs, Julie. You know it. I know it. The fans know it. But nobody wants to talk about the flexible rosters. Toronto's got an amazingly flexible roster, and that's good news going into the playoffs.
Yeah, that's just such an important part of it, as you mentioned. We saw, all of us remember just back in the bubble year, even, Tavares going out in that first game against Montreal, that was like just such a heartbreaker. And then the fact that that changes everything. And a guy can go out early on something, and obviously, knock on wood, you don't want to see anyone get injured, but that's just part of the game. And especially with the level of play and how guys are really upping the ante on a lot of things, you just never know what can happen. But when we look at the week as a whole, it feels like really positive, right? You bounce back after your loss in Florida, and you end up with this sensational win in overtime against Tampa, and then you keep it rolling with the shutout. You're winning in different ways. But let's get that first game, that Florida game, that they were outmatched and they were worked out everything in every way. I mean, what do you take from that game now when you look back on it, even after just the week that we had?
Oh, I think it's going to be a positive thing long term. And the reason why I say that is because I could see the response the next night in Tampa. They challenged one another to a man. Now, they're not going to say that publicly, but whether the coach's words, and we all read what the coach said, Craig Berube after the game, he didn't like the physical play, didn't like the way they competed. When professional athletes here, we didn't like the way they competed, and we didn't like the lack of physicality. They take that as a personal affront. And so I don't think Berube beat him up, but what I think happened is guys probably challenge one another in the room saying, hey, did you give an A effort? Did you give an A effort? And so one guy, I'll never forget being in a team meeting during the playoffs. We were playing Boston, and Kevin Stevens stood up in the room, and he said, guys, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to be part of this right now. And you know what? I'm the most guilty party. And as soon as he said that, it was like a rallying cry. Everybody's like, no, Kevin, it's not. He's like, yeah, it was me. And I got to be better, and all of you got to be better. And once he did that, Joey Mullen spoke up, Mary Lemieux spoke up, Larry Murphy spoke, and we just took games over. And we never looked back. We ended up winning the cup that year in 1991. But I was in that meeting, and I tell you what, that was a really good example of amazing leadership by Kevin Stevens. And the rest of the guys rallied around that. And I know from having been around, when you get that and that trust to challenge one another, it makes a massive difference. I think that happened after the Florida game, and there was definitely a carryover to the Tampa game in a positive way.
Right.
In a positive way.
That's a great story about just the communication and accountability within a team, within a locker room, because you could tell some teams that don't talk about that kind of stuff, and they just maybe they just stomach it, try to go on. But like, I think that there's so much value to that, because then, as you said, like you can tell guys, no, that's not your fault. Like, I should have been more in this position. Or I should have been doing this. And then you're not only are you acknowledging it to yourself, but then everyone else can kind of understand where everyone fits in, like where you think you're. And if you were to tell someone like, oh no, you were really good in that area, but maybe in this area, you could be a little bit better. Like communication is just like, the key to everything. So teams that have that and accountability and are able to talk about it without it blowing up a locker room are ones that usually go all the way. As you mentioned, you guys had a very successful year there. So then it could be, I do believe it will be a positive for them, because they know exactly that was Florida to a T. That was the Florida we've seen their identity over and over the last couple of years. They're just so fantastic at making you not like, you can't get out of your own zone when you're against Florida. It's just they're so strong on forcing turnovers and really just their relentless forecheck. And I mean, if they were to see them in the playoffs, now knowing what they've already seen and experienced, in what way do you think things would be different just because of that game?
Well, first of all, they know there need to be physical pushback from the start, number one. Number two, Brandon Montour's playing in Seattle. Oliver Ekman-Larsson's playing in Toronto. And Aaron Ekblad right now isn't playing. And it's going to be interesting to see, because of suspension, because of a PED. It'll be interesting to see whether he can get it back in the rails. So 3 of their top 6 guys on defense aren't there right now. And Matthew Tkachuk's not playing. So you look at it, if you're Toronto, you say, okay, we've identified this. They're going to get a ton of intel from Oliver Ekman-Larsson, which is huge. And they're going to have and Stolarz as well, who was the goalie there.
Right.
So they're going to know Florida really well. But one of the things I would encourage anybody that plays Florida, you got to establish a cycle game. Everybody says, oh, we want to score off the rush. We want to do this. We want to do that. I'm telling you, ground and pound against them. What is a bully not like? Bullies don't like to get punched in the face.
Yep.
They don't. And if Florida turns every game into a street fight, you don't have to turn it into a street fight, but you got to turn it into ground and pound and force them to be uncomfortable physically. And the way you do that, if you're Toronto, you play a 4-line game and you ground and pound from the top of that circle in the offensive zone all the way to the back of the boards. And if you do that, they'll get frustrated.
That's great. I love that. I love that advice. I think that that's something hopefully that they take into this if they end up seeing them. We know that they need 1 point at this moment. We're recording Monday morning. For them to be able to clinch that Atlantic division, or for Tampa to not get 1 point, which that could happen on Monday night. They face Buffalo Tuesday and then Detroit on Thursday. So an interesting week. They don't have the division locked up, but as we mentioned, very close to it. How do you approach this week if you're Craig Berube?
I'm talking to my trainers a lot, and I'm talking to my medical people a lot. And then at the third junction, I'm talking to my players. And there's certain guys I think need some rest. You've already talked about Jake McCabe. Obviously, Oliver Ekman-Larsson hasn't played the last few games. After the Tampa game, Oliver Ekman-Larsson hasn't played the last 2. So I'm talking to my medical people. Does Austin Matthews need a little bit of a rest? Does Johnny Tavares need a little bit of a rest? What about Matthew Knies? Where are we with Morgan Riley? We talked about Saturday night. There was speculation on the broadcast that maybe he got hurt in the game. So I'm talking to my medical professional people, and I know people don't want to hear this term, quote unquote, load management. I'm not going to use it. I won't use it. But what I'm going to say is you got to be prudent in terms of guys that need rest and guys you think need to get more ice time so that they're ready to get their battle levels up for the start of the playoffs, which will probably be on Saturday night.
Yeah. Well, I think actually, I mean, that's what they want, right? Like if you're Toronto, your sports night, hockey night in Canada, you want Saturday night, but they play Thursday. So then, and Ottawa will be waiting. Like, it feels like a very quick turnaround to be playing your first game on a Saturday, right?
Yeah, it is. There's no question. But I think that the networks might have something to say about this. It has not been, as we all know, it has not been a fruitful year for the networks in terms of ratings. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And if they don't play Saturday, I'd have to think they'd start on Monday night. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I would think they'd start Saturday, but I don't know that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll have to see who they end up matching up against. What is it? I haven't looked at the standings, but is it Ottawa for sure, we think, if they win the division, or regardless?
I think there's a real good chance that it's Ottawa. I don't think they're going to pass Washington, and I would say Washington will get the 8th seed and Toronto will get the 7th seed if they win the Atlantic.
Right. Yeah. So let's.
I'm going to say
that would be
Ottawa.
just
it'll be Ottawa.
Fantastic for everyone involved. I mean, look, and the fact Montreal can lock it up as well. I mean, Columbus. It's amazing how many people don't want that second wild card spot.
You know what's interesting though? You say that. Look at what Columbus has done. They just swept
I know they do want it,
and they're doing it with Jet Graves. I mean, give that kid so much credit. He's a kid that played for the Barrie Colts, undrafted player. I watched him play in the American Hockey League with the Cleveland Monsters. This guy's gone in there. Good for him. I mean, he's 6 feet tall. He's about 190 pounds. He's played fantastically well. And I watched Montreal. Julie, I got to tell you, the Montreal Canadiens to me are full value. And I know people in Toronto want to hear that. The character, the courage, the coaching, the 3 C's that are really important in hockey. But the way Nick Suzuki and the way Lane Hudson and the way some of their star players have really elevated, it's phenomenal to me. Even if they don't make it, this has been an amazingly positive season for them. I do think they will make it because if they win tonight, we're taping this on Monday morning. If they win on Monday night against Chicago, they're in. But it's been
which they should.
They should, but I never in the NHL. The other guys get paid too, so I never put anybody in.
That's good. I had never heard that.
The other guys get paid too, so I don't know. But here's what I just tell you right now: that push for the last playoff spot in the East. There are 2 teams that nobody thought would be there. Nobody thought Columbus would be there. But nobody thought Montreal would be there. And they all thought Detroit would get it. They all thought Boston might get it. And they all thought the New York Rangers might get it. And all 3 of those have been a disaster zone. They've not been good. Not been good.
And both with Montreal and Columbus fighting for that second spot, they're already playing that playoff hockey. They want it. They're fired up. They're ready to go, locked in. And that's not what anyone in Toronto wants to hear, but that's the truth. And so that's something that Toronto might have to deal with if they're lucky enough and they end up having to face one of those teams. That would mean that they would win their first round. And, we'll see what happens beyond that at this point. It's an exciting time. This is our last McGuire Monday before the playoffs. Isn't that nuts to think about it?
Oh, it breaks my heart because I love it's one of the best parts about starting the week this way. You have to be so informed that I get to work with you, and it's so much fun. I love doing it.
Well, it's been great, and it's always wonderful to look back on the week and see kind of like what we thought might happen, what happened, and just everything. And it's gone. I was just saying to someone, sometimes the season feels like it's dragging at points, and then it feels now like, oh my gosh, we're here at the playoffs. I can't believe the playoffs are happening starting this weekend. I'm shocked also because I booked a trip to go home for Easter like a long time ago. And I was like, oh gosh, I didn't realize Easter and the playoffs. Yeah. But luckily my home is Toronto. So hopefully maybe be able to mix in some way of combining not spending any time with my family and just watching playoffs in Toronto. But luckily the 2 go hand in hand because everyone in Toronto is a dialed in fan of hockey. I'm not going to call them all Leafs fans, but they are into the game. Pierre, thank you so much for everything. This has been an amazing McGuire Monday and amazing McGuire Monday season of it, our first season of it. And we're heading into then McGuire Monday playoff season, which will probably be more than a Monday because that would just be really boring at that point. Because first round, as we know, is like the best thing in sports ever. It's mayhem, but it's exactly what we want. So, Pierre, thank you so much. And one thing, I guess, if you could say, what's one thing that you think maybe the Leafs, other than health and load, not prudent, not load management, what's one thing you think the Leafs really should be dialed in on this week as they head into playoffs?
The lineup. What's your lineup going to be opening night? What's your best lineup? And that's what you got to focus in. Line combinations, defense pairings, health of your players, but the lineup. What's your A lineup? And go forward, prepare for the rest of the week, whether you're playing on Saturday night to start the playoffs, Sunday afternoon, or Monday night. What's your best lineup? And figure it out quick.
Right. It's an embarrassment of riches that they have, but sometimes that makes things a little bit more difficult to figure out who goes where in certain circumstances. Pierre, thanks so much. Have a great week. And everyone, thank you so much for watching, listening, and make sure to like and subscribe and follow us throughout the playoffs. Should be a good one.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.